The alarms blared across Aegis 7 space station, their piercing wail cutting through the usual hum of life support systems. Captain Mara Liu's head snapped up from her datapad, her trained reflexes already propelling her toward the command center before her conscious mind had fully processed the emergency code. "Status report," she demanded. Bursting through the sliding doors, the command center, usually a picture of methodical calm, had erupted into controlled chaos. Screens flashed red warnings while crew members spoke in urgent, clipped tones. Lieutenant Elena Ortiz, the station's atmospheric systems engineer, looked up from her console with an expression Mara had never seen before: pure, unfiltered fear. "Oxygen systems are shutting down, all of them, simultaneously." Mara felt her chest tighten, though she knew it was psychological rather than physiological, at least for now. "Equipment malfunction?" "Negative." Elena's fingers flew across her terminal. "The systems are responding to external commands that are overriding our protocols. This isn't a technical failure. Someone is doing this deliberately." Aegis 7, the pride of the planetary union, orbited the distant world of Bahrain like a gleaming testament to human ingenuity. In 1242, it represented the frontier of human expansion and scientific endeavor, a multinational research facility dedicated to studying sustainable adaptation to extreme environments. The irony that they were now facing one of the most extreme environments possible, their own station without oxygen, wasn't lost on Mara. "Try the emergency reserves," she ordered. Moving to her command station, her specialty in human physiology and vacuum conditions was about to become far more relevant than she'd ever wanted. The main view screen displayed a diagram of the station's life support network. Crimson lines highlighting each system as it failed. The backup oxygen tanks remained stubbornly offline. Their activation protocols locked. "Communications?" Mara asked, turning to Communications Officer Takahashi. "Disrupted," he reported grimly. "We're getting interference across all channels. I can't reach Earth control." Lieutenant Raj Patel, their pilot and resident biosystems expert, spoke up from across the room. "Captain, at current consumption rates, we have approximately 6 hours of breathable air remaining in the circulating system." 6 hours. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. Dr. Kada, the station director, burst into the command center, his usually impeccable appearance disheveled. "The Zenith! It has to be them." Mara shot him a warning glance. The diplomatic tensions between the Planetary Union and the Zenith Alliance had been escalating for months, but jumping to conclusions wouldn't help their immediate survival. "We need facts, not speculation," she said firmly. "Aman, analysis." The station's AI manifested as a holographic projection in the center of the room. Its featureless blue face remained passive as it processed the available data. Probability of Zenith involvement, 87.3%. Recent sensor logs indicate a Zenith vessel maintained position 2.7 kilometers off our port side for 18.4 minutes before moving to a distance of 34 kilometers. The oxygen system failures began 2.6 minutes after their repositioning. Dr. Kadar's face flushed with anger. "We should prepare to negotiate, if they want concessions." "No," Mara cut him off. "We don't know what they want, and showing immediate weakness won't help us. Our priority is survival." She turned to face her crew, mind racing through scenarios and solutions. Years of training in crisis management kicked in, and despite the mounting pressure in her chest, both literal and figurative, she felt a strange calm descend. "We're going to implement immediate oxygen conservation protocols," she announced. "And then we're going to try something unconventional." The crew looked at her expectantly, desperate for direction. "We're going to treat this as an endurance training exercise." A beat of silence followed before Lieutenant Patel broke it with a short, incredulous laugh. "Endurance training, with all due respect, Captain, we're being suffocated." "Precisely," Mara said. "And as it happens, we have the foremost expert in human physiological responses to vacuum conditions on board. Me." She moved to the central display and brought up her research files. My work has focused on extending human survival in adverse conditions. We've all undergone basic hypoxia training, but I've been developing advanced techniques, controlled breathing methods, physiological conditioning, psychological adaptation strategies, all designed to reduce oxygen consumption while maintaining cognitive function. Eleanor frowned. You're suggesting we practice holding our breath? I'm suggesting we train our bodies and minds to function on less oxygen than we think we need, Mara clarified, while simultaneously working on technical solutions to restore our supply. Dr. Kadar shook his head. This is insanity. We should be focusing all resources on contacting Earth and negotiating with the Zenith. We'll do that too, Mara assured him, but we need multiple approaches. If the Zenith are testing us, and that's a big if, showing resourcefulness may be more beneficial than immediate capitulation. She turned to Raj. Lieutenant, you've participated in my experimental protocols. You can help train the crew in the breathing techniques. Raj nodded, his initial skepticism giving way to determination. Yes, Captain. Elena, keep working on bypassing the external locks on our systems. Takahashi, continue attempts to restore communications. Dr. Kada, please coordinate with medical to prepare for potential hypoxia cases. She paused, looking each of them in the eye. I know this sounds unorthodox, but trust me, humans can endure far more than we believe possible when properly conditioned. Let's show whoever is behind this exactly what we're capable of. As the crew dispersed to their assignments, Mara allowed herself one moment of doubt. Hidden from the others, the oxygen levels were already noticeably thinner. She could feel her body beginning to compensate. Deeper breaths, slightly elevated heart rate, the subtle signs of physiological stress that would only increase with time. 6 hours. It wasn't enough to restore systems or receive help from Earth. Even if they could get a message through, but it might be enough time to implement her plan. A plan born from years of research that she'd never expected to test under such dire circumstances. In the biology lab, Mara quickly assembled the senior staff and began her crash course in oxygen conservation. The human body typically consumes about 550 liters of pure oxygen per day, she explained, her voice deliberately measured and calm. But we can reduce that consumption significantly through conscious control. She demonstrated the breathing technique. Slow, deep inhalation through the nose, brief hold, then controlled exhalation through slightly parted lips. This minimizes oxygen waste and maximizes absorption. Your body will protest at first, but it will adapt. Raj added, I've trained with Captain Liu on these techniques. They're challenging but effective. Remember, panic is your enemy. It increases oxygen consumption dramatically. Mara continued, we'll work in shifts, 2 hours of intensive conservation, then 1 hour of more normal activity while others take their turn. This prevents exhaustion while extending our collective air supply. Eleanor, who had been monitoring her tablet, looked up with a frown. Captain, oxygen levels have dropped another 2%. At this rate, we have less than 5 hours, not 6. The news sent a ripple of tension through the assembled crew. Then we'll just have to work faster, Mara replied, refusing to let anxiety take hold. Any progress on the systems? The external commands are sophisticated, Elena said. They've locked us out at the hardware level. I'm trying to reroute through tertiary subsystems, but it's slow going. Keep at it, Mara encouraged. And everyone, begin your breathing exercises now. Slow, controlled, conscious. As the hours passed, the atmosphere on Aegis 7 grew both literally and figuratively thinner. The emergency lighting had activated to conserve power, casting the station in an eerie crimson glow that made everyone's pale faces look feverish and alien. 3 hours in, they suffered their first casualty to the thinning air. Technician Yoshida collapsed while attempting to manually override an air recycling unit. The medical team responded immediately, administering emergency oxygen from their dwindling personal supplies and stabilizing him, but it was a stark reminder of their vulnerability. In the command center, Dr. Kadar's composure had deteriorated along with the air quality. "This is hopeless," he muttered, his breath coming in quick, shallow gasps, exactly the wrong response to their situation. "We need to send a message of surrender to the Zenith. Tell them we'll comply with whatever they want." "We don't negotiate from a position of desperation," Mara countered, though her own body was fighting for each breath. Her training had prepared her better than most, but even she felt the crushing fatigue that came with oxygen deprivation. "And we haven't exhausted our options yet." Aman, the AI, flickered slightly as power fluctuations affected its holographic projection. "Oxygen levels at 18%. Human cognitive impairment begins at approximately 16%. "Thank you for that helpful reminder," Raj said dryly, his normally rich voice now raspy. Mara checked the time. 4 hours and 20 minutes had passed since the system's failure. Their window was closing rapidly. Elena stumbled into the command center, her movements clumsy from hypoxia despite her disciplined adherence to the breathing techniques. "Captain," she gasped, "I've found something." She pulled up a schematic on the main display. "There's a secondary atmospheric mixing chamber that operates on a separate control network. It's designed for experimental gas combinations in the xenobiology lab. If we can reroute it to the main life support system, we could bypass the locked controls." Mara finished, a spark of hope flaring in her oxygen-starved brain. "What's the catch?" Elena's expression turned grim. "The mixing chamber contains trace amounts of xenon and other experimental gases. Introducing them into our breathing supply isn't ideal." "Compared to not breathing at all?" Raj asked. "Point taken," Elena conceded. "But there's another problem. The manual override is located in the maintenance shaft below the xenobiology lab. Someone would need to physically access it and remain there to keep the system operational until we can restore the main oxygen supply." Mara understood the unspoken danger. The maintenance shaft would be the first place to fill with the mixed gases. Whoever went in would be exposed to the highest concentrations and potential toxicity. "I'll go," she said without hesitation. Dr. Kadar shook his head vehemently. "Absolutely not. You're the captain and our best hope for survival. Send someone else." "For once." Mara agreed with him, not because she feared the risk, but because her expertise was needed to coordinate their collective survival. "Raj," she said, turning to the lieutenant, "your biosystems training makes you the most qualified, but I won't order this. It has to be voluntary." Raj met her gaze steadily, despite the visible effort it took him to remain focused. "Consider me volunteered, Captain." Mara nodded gratefully. "Elena, you'll guide him through the procedure remotely. Takahashi, continue working on communications. If we can restore even brief contact with Earth, we need to let them know what's happening." As Raj prepared for his dangerous mission, Mara felt the weight of command pressing down on her more heavily than ever. The lives of everyone aboard Aegis 7 hung in the balance, dependent on her decisions and their collective will to survive. The maintenance shaft was accessed through a narrow hatch in the floor of the xenobiology lab. As Raj descended into the dimly lit tunnel, his breathing apparatus, containing the last of their emergency oxygen reserves, hissed softly with each breath. "I'm at the control panel." His voice crackled over the comm. "It's older than I expected. Analog controls. That's why it's not affected by the override," Elena explained from the command center. "You'll need to manually divert the flow by repositioning the valves in sequence." Mara watched Elena guide Raj through the complex procedure, her own breathing carefully controlled despite the growing pressure in her chest. The oxygen level had dropped to 16%, and she could see the effects on her crew: sluggish movements, difficulty concentrating, occasional confusion. "Valve 1 repositioned," Raj reported. There was a pause, then a concerning sound of coughing. "Some gas leakage. Continuing to valve 2." Mara exchanged worried glances with Elena. The experimental gases were already affecting him. "Raj, what's your status?" Mara asked. "I'm functional," he replied, his voice strained. "Valve 2 is stuck, attempting to use leverage." The minutes crawled by, each one bringing them closer to the critical threshold where consciousness would become impossible to maintain. Mara felt her vision narrowing, dark edges encroaching on her peripheral sight, a classic sign of hypoxia that her training allowed her to recognize but not prevent. "Valve 2, repositioned," Raj finally reported, followed by more coughing. "Moving to final valve." Dr. Kada, who had been sitting slumped in a corner, suddenly straightened. "What's that sound?" A low hum was building throughout the station, the life support systems coming back online in a new configuration. "He's done it," Elena whispered, staring at her readouts in disbelief. "The mixing chamber is feeding into the main system." Mara checked the atmospheric sensors. Oxygen levels rising. 17%. 18%. A ragged cheer went up from the crew, quickly followed by a collective deep breath as the slightly strange-smelling but gloriously breathable air filled the station. "Raj, you've done it," Mara said into her comm. "You can return now." Silence. "Lieutenant Patel, acknowledge?" She tried again, alarm rising in her voice. More silence. "He's not responding," Elena said, the brief moment of triumph evaporating. "The gas is in the maintenance shaft. They must be at toxic levels." Without hesitation, Mara moved toward the exit. "I'm going after him. The rest of you, continue restoring systems." "Captain," Dr. Kadar protested, finding his courage now that immediate suffocation wasn't imminent. "You can't risk yourself. The station needs you." "The station needs every crew member," Mara replied firmly, "and I won't leave anyone behind." The journey to the xenobiology lab felt interminable, though in reality it took less than 5 minutes. The newly mixed air, while breathable, carried an acrid tang that burned slightly in Mara's lungs. She could only imagine how concentrated the gases were in the maintenance shaft. When she reached the hatch, she found it still open, wisps of colorful vapor rising from the darkness below. Without the luxury of proper protective gear, she tied a moistened cloth over her nose and mouth, a woefully inadequate precaution, and descended. The shaft was narrow and poorly lit, filled with a swirling mixture of gases that stung her eyes and skin. She found Raj collapsed near the final valve, his breathing apparatus discarded nearby, presumably emptied of its oxygen supply. "Raj," she called, shaking him gently. No response. Despite her own dizziness from the toxic atmosphere, Mara managed to hoist the unconscious lieutenant over her shoulder in a firefighter's carry. The climb back up the ladder was excruciating. Each rung a battle against her screaming muscles and the increasing disorientation caused by the gas mixture. By the time she emerged into the lab, dragging Raj behind her, her vision was swimming with colorful halos. She activated her comm with a shaking hand. "Medical? Emergency. Xenobiology lab," she managed before collapsing beside her rescued crewmate. She awoke some indeterminate time later in the medical bay, an oxygen mask secured over her face. The air tasted gloriously pure after the contaminated mixture they'd been breathing. Dr. Kada stood nearby, consulting with the medical staff. "Welcome back, Captain," he said. Noticing her consciousness, his tone was respectful, with none of the earlier antagonism. "You gave us quite a scare." Mara removed the mask briefly. "Raj?" "Lieutenant Patel is recovering," Dr. Kadar assured her. "He suffered more severe exposure than you did, but he's responding well to treatment. The man has remarkable resilience." "The station?" "Functioning, though not optimally. The mixed gas solution was brilliant but unsustainable long-term. However," he added with something approaching admiration, "it bought us enough time, Communications have been restored. Mara replaced the mask, taking a deep, grateful breath before asking, "Earth knows our situation." "Yes, and that's not all." Dr. Kadar hesitated. "We received a transmission from the Zenith vessel." Mara's fatigue vanished instantly. She sat up, ignoring the wave of dizziness the movement caused. "What did they say?" "That's the strange part," Dr. Kadar replied, clearly bewildered. "They congratulated us. According to their message, this was a test of human endurance capabilities. They claim no intention of causing permanent harm, merely a desire to observe our crisis response mechanisms." Mara stared at him incredulously. "They nearly killed us all. Was an experiment?" "Apparently, yes. The Zenith have a different perspective on interspecies relations than we do. They believe that understanding a species' response to extreme stress provides valuable insight into their true nature." "And what insight did they gain from us?" Mara asked, torn between anger and curiosity. Dr. Kadar actually smiled slightly. "That humans are surprisingly adaptable and resourceful. Your endurance training approach impressed them particularly. They've shared data indicating that no other species they've tested has ever implemented systematic physical adaptation techniques during an artificial crisis." "So we passed their test?" "With flying colors. It seems the Planetary Union is interpreting this as a positive diplomatic development. Strangely enough, apparently, the Zenith only test species they consider worthy of serious consideration as galactic partners." Mara wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry at the absurdity of it all. Their lives had been endangered as some sort of cosmic job interview. Over the next few days, as the station's systems were fully restored and the crew recovered from their ordeal, a strange sense of pride began to emerge among the Aegis 7 personnel. They had faced an impossible situation and survived through a combination of scientific innovation, physical discipline, and sheer human stubbornness. Data collected during the crisis revealed that several crew members had established new records for cognitive function under extreme hypoxic conditions. Mara's endurance training protocols, implemented in the most dire circumstances imaginable, had proven more effective than even her research had predicted. A week after the incident, with the station back to normal operations, Mara stood in the observation dome, gazing out at the stars. The Zenith vessel was still visible as a distant point of light, maintaining its position exactly 34 kilometers from Aegis 7. Elena joined her, following her gaze to the alien ship. "Do you think they're satisfied with what they learned about us?" "I doubt it," Mara replied thoughtfully. "I think they're just getting started." "What do you mean?" "The Zenith message mentioned this was a preliminary assessment. Their communication patterns suggest they value comprehensive data collection." Elena looked alarmed. "You think they'll try something like this again?" "Not exactly the same," Mara said. "But different challenges, different tests. They're cataloging our capabilities, our breaking points, our adaptive strategies." "That's settling." "Yes," Mara agreed. "But it's also an opportunity. Every test they devise, every crisis we overcome, we learn more about ourselves. We push our boundaries further." She turned from the window to face Elena directly. "I've requested that the Planetary Union formally incorporate my emergency protocols into standard training for all space personnel. What we're calling endurance training may save countless lives in the future, regardless of whether the crisis is engineered by curious aliens or genuinely accidental." Elena nodded slowly, making something positive out of a nightmare. "I can appreciate that. It's what humans do best," Mara said with a small smile. "We adapt, we endure, we transform our challenges into strengths." As if in response to her words, the distant Zenith ship briefly pulsed with a blue light before returning to its steady glow. A signal? A scanning beam? Or simply a coincidence of alien technology? There was no way to know. What Mara did know, with absolute certainty, was that whatever test came next, her crew would be ready. The Zenith had unwittingly given them a gift, the knowledge of their own extraordinary capacity for survival. 3 months later, the newly implemented Aegis protocols for crisis endurance had become standard training throughout the Planetary Union's space program. Captain Mara Liu had been commended for her leadership and innovative approach to what diplomatic communiques now delicately referred to as the oxygen conservation incident. Raj had recovered fully and become an enthusiastic instructor in the new training regimen, his first-hand experience lending credibility to the sometimes grueling exercises. Elena had developed new bypass systems for critical life support components, ensuring no single point of failure could threaten a station again. Even Dr. Kadar had found a renewed sense of purpose, advocating for more comprehensive crisis preparation across all space stations. The diplomatic situation with the Xanath had evolved in unexpected ways. Far from escalating tensions, the incident had opened new channels of communication. The alien species expressed what could only be interpreted as respect for humanity's performance under pressure, leading to tentative cultural exchange programs. Mara stood on the observation deck of Aegis 7, watching as a small Zenith shuttle approached the station, the first official diplomatic visit in the history of human-Zenith relations. The aliens had requested her specifically as their primary contact. "Nervous?" Raj asked, joining her at the viewport. "Cautiously optimistic," she replied. "They've agreed to formal non-intervention protocols for all future assessments. No more surprise suffocation experiments." Raj chuckled. "Shame, I was just getting good at not breathing." The shuttle docked with a gentle thud, and Mara straightened her uniform. "Let's go meet our evaluators." As the airlock cycled and prepared to admit their visitors, Mara couldn't help but glance at the emergency oxygen indicators, a habit she'd developed since the incident. The gauges showed full capacity, all systems normal. But she knew better than anyone that true survival didn't depend on technology alone. It resided in the human capacity to face the impossible with innovation, cooperation, and the stubborn refusal to surrender to circumstance. The Zenith might have cut off their oxygen as a test, but humanity had transformed that challenge into an opportunity for growth. Whatever the universe threw at them next, they would be ready, not just to survive, but to thrive. The airlock doors slid open, revealing their alien visitors. And as Mara stepped forward to make humanity's first formal greeting to the Zenith, she took a deep, appreciative breath of the oxygen-rich air of Aegis 7, a simple pleasure she would never again take for granted. Through the observation window behind the Zenith delegation, a second alien ship could be seen approaching in the distance, its unusual configuration suggesting it wasn't simply another diplomatic vessel. Mara made a mental note to increase sensor monitoring, even as she extended her hand in greeting to the aliens before her. The endurance test might be officially over, but she suspected their trials were just beginning. And strangely, she found herself looking forward to the challenge.